In the previous section, we began the process of developing a situation model. Namely, we introduced defining your biodiversity program scope and biodiversity focal interests. You also learned about how you can illustrate the potential impact of these focal interests on human well-being interests. In this presentation, we will discuss defining and prioritizing direct threats to your biodiversity focal interests. A direct threat is a human action or unsustainable use that immediately degrades one or more biodiversity focal interests. A direct threat has at least one actor associated with it and can sometimes be a natural phenomenon that is altered or whose impact is increased by human actions. In situation model diagrams, direct threats are represented by pink boxes. In our example situation model, the design team identified overfishing, small-scale agriculture, large-scale cattle ranching, illegal selective logging, and excessive hunting and revenge killing as the main direct threats affecting their biodiversity focal interests. You may notice that this example stops at the biodiversity focal interests and does not include ecosystem services or human well-being interests. We have done this mainly for space reasons and to simplify the model. However, your model may include these additional elements on the right-hand side. To identify direct threats, you should look at your biodiversity focal interests and ask what human actions are directly affecting those focal interests. You should think about the main direct threats and try not to include every single threat. A useful resource for thinking about direct threats is the Conservation Measures Partnership Direct Threats Classification System, which you can find linked below this video in the resources for this section. One tip to keep in mind is that the threats should directly affect the biodiversity focal interests. You should not include indirect legal, social, cultural, and economic factors. This information will be included in your situation model at a later step. When defining your direct threats, you should take caution about wording to avoid alienating stakeholders who may feel they are identified as a threat. Using language like illegal, unsustainable, or poorly planned can help clarify why or how certain human actions are direct threats. As you identify your main direct threats, you can link them up to the biodiversity focal interests they affect. You'll notice that in many cases, a direct threat will affect multiple biodiversity focal interests. In some instances, you may find it useful to specify how the threat affects the biodiversity focal interests by identifying the stress. In our example, the design team wanted to clarify that large-scale cattle ranching affects rivers by altering natural sedimentation regimes. Only include stresses when the means of threat impact is not obvious. Once you have linked your direct threats up to your biodiversity focal interests, you need to get a sense of how big a threat they pose to the biodiversity within your scope. The reason for this is that resources are typically limited, and you are unlikely to be able to address all threats. By rating threats, you can identify those that might require more immediate attention and resources. This step directly responds to USAID's Biodiversity Code requirement that activities must be identified based on an analysis of drivers and threats to biodiversity. There are many ways to rate threats. As with all of these steps, you want to use the best evidence available to you. In some cases, an organization working in the region may have already done a threat assessment, and you can simply use that assessment if the scope, timing, and quality is acceptable. If you are using Marathi software, there is a threat rating interface that walks you through a set of criteria to come up with a summary rating. You can also use the threat rating worksheet developed by USAID to support teams in brainstorming and rating direct threats, which you can find linked in the resources below. To rate your threats, you will want to involve people familiar with your region, the biodiversity within it, and the threats in the region. In this image, that summary rating of our Grand River example is displayed with stoplight-colored squares in the upper left-hand corner of the pink direct threat boxes. And the key to the ratings is located at the bottom right. To come up with the overall threat rating scores, the conservation community and Marathi commonly use the following three criteria. Scope, which is the proportion of the biodiversity focal interest that your team expects to be affected by the threat within the next 10 years or so, given the continuation of current circumstances and trends. Severity, which is defined as the level of damage to the biodiversity focal interest within the threat scope that you expect to see if current trends continue, and irreversibility, which is the degree to which the biodiversity focal interest can be restored if the threat were removed. If you want more information on threat ratings, please see pages 14 through 16 of the USAID How-To Guide 1, or see pages 6 through 11 in USAID's Biodiversity Supplement Guide 2, Rating Direct Threats in USAID Biodiversity Programming, which is linked below. Supplemental Guide 2 explains these criteria in more detail and provides a rating scale for assessing a threat against each criterion.
In the next presentation, we'll look at the fifth step in the process, defining and adding drivers.